China's senior diplomat Yang Jiechi and State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang will meet with top U.S. diplomats in the U.S. state of Alaska on Thursday and Friday. And it's the first face-to-face meeting between the two countries since U.S. President Joe Biden took office. And for more on that, let's go live to our correspondent Nathan King in Anchorage, Alaska. Nathan, morning from Beijing. Could you give us a preview of the upcoming meeting?
Okay, well, logistically, this is what I know is going to happen. Here's the Captain Cook Hotel behind me. That's where the talks are going to happen, and it's named after an explorer, and I'll be sure they're searching for some sort of common ground. But like Captain Cook, it's going to be hard to find because, as you know, the rhetoric has been ratcheted up over the last few days, especially from Washington, as Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, tours East Asia as part of his tour of allies, Japan and the Republic of Korea. He's been turning up the rhetoric and the reality when it comes to China policy, criticizing human rights and also expanding the number of Hong Kong and Chinese officials that could be sanctioned because of the Hong Kong Autonomy Act passed on the Trump administration through Congress. But I can tell you, even though the Chinese side have said, look, let's sit down, let's talk, whatever, there was a big interview, as you know, with Chinese media with the Chinese ambassador to the US, Ambassador Cui Tiankai. And even though he had some diplomatic words, he also had some very strong words when it comes to US criticism of essentially what China believes is domestic policy. I'm talking, of course, about Xinjiang, Hong Kong, but also the pressure that China has been feeling from Washington over Taipei as well. Now, we did get a reaffirmation from the Biden administration's press secretary, Jen Psaki, earlier, that the US is sticking by the cornerstone of the US-China relationship, which, as you know, is the One China policy, which recognizes there is only one China, and that is the People's Republic based in Beijing. It would be good to get an affirmation of that also from the principals here, because, of course, we have not just Secretary of State Tony Blinken coming back from Asia, but also being joined by the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and their teams, but also, of course, as you know, the most senior Chinese diplomat Yang Jiechi, and of course Foreign Minister Wang as well. Now, we understand that they will be making comments to the press about an hour before their talks, around lunchtime, and then they will be behind closed doors. Now, how long those talks go on, we do not know. We do know that the US says they will push hard on the items they've been bringing up, but also when it comes to allies' concerns, Australia, for example, and its trade spat with Beijing. Also, on the Chinese side, they will be wanting to perhaps see where commerce goes. When are the tariffs coming off that are imposed by the Trump administration? All these sorts of things, and perhaps, maybe, some not just competition and adversaries, but also some cooperation. Climate change, it's freezing here. Alaska's at the front end of it, maybe that, but also some trade as well.
Indeed, a lot of important questions on the table, but you've been in Anchorage for several days, Nathan. How are people talking about this meeting,
yes,
or are they even aware of the meeting happening in their city?
Oh, no, they're aware, because people like us are on every street corner. I can tell you the world's media are arriving, not just from China, but across the US and also Asia as well. And I can tell you also, this is a good time to showcase Anchorage, but also Alaska. I was speaking to the former governor, Bill Walker, just a couple of days ago. They have a lot of ties to China, for example. In fact, it's the biggest trading partner of Alaska, has been for 13 years or so. They have a lot of energy projects that they would like to get underway, exporting natural gas from Alaska, things like that. So it is very much the upper minds of a lot of people in Anchorage, as well as the business community as well.
Thank you very much. Nathan King reporting from Anchorage in Alaska. Now, ahead of the meeting between Beijing and Washington, CGTN's Cui Tiankai looks into how the two participants on the U.S. side, Secretary of State Antony Blinken and also National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, feel about China.
Antony Blinken says China is the biggest geopolitical challenge the United States faces in the 21st century. When outlining the new administration's foreign policy priorities, he added China is the only country with the economic, diplomatic, military, and technological power to seriously challenge the international system.
Our relationship with China will be competitive when it should be, collaborative when it can be, and adversarial when it must be.
In response, Beijing says China brings opportunities instead of challenges to the world, and such ideological cliches would not do the U.S. any good. Similar to his predecessor Mike Pompeo, Blinken has been critical of China on almost every front. On COVID-19, Blinken said China has not been transparent since the initial outbreak to now. On Xinjiang, he claimed the genocide is being committed there, calling on China to provide international access to the region. And on Hong Kong, he recently said the U.S. will take action against what he calls violations of human rights there. Despite all the criticisms, Blinken is not closing the door on cooperation with China. For example, he said battling the climate change will be in the interest of both countries. Analysts have said the U.S. needs China to make progress on issues such as the DPRK. Unlike Blinken, Jake Sullivan has been relatively quiet on China. Back in 2017, he said the U.S. should encourage China's rise. And in 2019, he said Trump's tariff tactics against China were not working.
We are focused on steel, soy, coal. China's focused on quantum computing, AI, biotechnology. They're not thinking about their growth rate in the next quarter. They're thinking about their growth rate in the next quarter century.
To counter China's rise, Sullivan said in January that the U.S. should work with its allies to address what he calls trade and technology abuses. Asked about the upcoming meeting in Alaska, Sullivan said tariffs would not take center stage in talks. He said this is a message to China that Washington will engage with Beijing at a strategic level. 次回啊 CGTN 北京。
An earlier China media group interviewed the Chinese ambassador to the United States, Cui Tiankai, spoke about his expectations for the meeting and the recent U.S. sanctions on Chinese officials as well.
这一次双方在安克雷奇举行这么高级别的
This high-level dialogue between the two sides in Anchorage is indeed the first face-to-face dialogue and communication between officials of this level since the Biden administration took office. I think both sides attach great importance to it. We have done a lot in preparation in the past few days. Of course, we don't expect to solve all problems in one dialogue, so we don't have anything unrealistic. We hope this can be a beginning, and the two sides will start a process of honest, constructive, and rational dialogue and communication. If this can be achieved, the dialogue will already be successful. In short, I hope that both parties will come with sincerity and live with a better understanding of each other.
我认为任何国家之间的这种对话沟通
I believe that the prerequisite for dialogue and communication between any countries is that both sides should have the spirit of equality and mutual respect. The several issues you mentioned just now involve China's national sovereignty, territorial integrity, and national unity. With regard to these core interests, China has no room for compromise and concessions. This is also the attitude we will make clear in this meeting. If they think China will compromise and give in under the pressure of other countries, or China wants to pursue the so-called result of this dialogue by accepting any unilateral request, I think they should give up this illusion, as this attitude will only lead the dialogue to a dead end. If someone thinks that China came to snowy Alaska with sincerity this time to make compromise and concession, then I would suggest that my colleagues in Beijing cancel this trip as soon as possible. Why bother to come here? I hope the people with such ideas should give up this illusion.